second. In the users import step, which is what we're doing now, we have different ways of importing or creating users in UC Server. The first and default selection is from Active Directory. I've already created users in Active Directory prior to doing the install, so that's the selection we're going to go with. Other options include importing users from Microsoft Exchange Server, importing users from a text-based file. This particular option is very handy when you've got a large deployment to do. A lot of the configuration can be done off-site. Collecting that information from the customer, you can create the file in advance with all the names, all the extensions, all the MAC addresses from the phones, writing the users' names on the phone boxes so that when they're delivered, they know which one is which, and as well as the message store and what user mode they're in. All that can be specified from the text file. The last option is manual entry of new users. This is very handy for small deployments that aren't using Active Directory. You just type the name in, the extension, and you're off to the races. So we're going to select import from Active Directory. Here you can pick the domain. If there's multiple domains, they'll all be listed here. And whether or not we want to use Windows-enabled Active Directory users, so that's the tight link with Active Directory, or if we want to have local users which are not linked to Active Directory. Because Active Directory defines the user's name, first name, last name, their message store, and their authentication as well with Windows. So once the user starts the client, they'll be automatically authenticated based on their Windows authentication. So here we pulled all the users from Active Directory. The users that I created are at the bottom of the list here. Bob Thompson, Joan Everson, Ed Jones, Tina Hernandez, and Jim Kyverson. These are all users in Velartica, the fictitious company on which we base all of our correspondence. So I'm going to associate them with different identities from 201 all the way through 205. This is a simple exercise of typing the numbers in. And then the next step is to associate the user with a particular MAC address. So this is where the barcode scanner comes in handy. Bob, we're going to give the first phone, which is a Grandstream. Joan, the second one, which is Polycom, and Ed's the third with the SNOM phone. So I'm going to take the barcode scanner, and I'm going to take the phone, and I'm going to read the MAC address off the back. Okay? So that's a Grandstream 1200. The next phone is Joan Everson, and this is a Polycom, so I'm going to read that MAC address. Okay? Sometimes it can be a little finicky. And the last one is Ed Jones, and he's going to get the SNOM 320. So now that the MAC addresses are entered in the system, we know that they're right because they're scanned right from the box. And then all we have to do is pick the phone type. So the first one's the Grandstream 1200, the second one is the Polycom 650, and the third one is the SNOM 320. The remaining two users we're not going to assign phones to. They're going to be effectively phantom users, which means if somebody dials their extension, it's going to go right to voicemail or to their personal assistant instead of ringing a phone. So it's going to go through. We're importing users from Active Directory, that information, and creating a binding between Active Directory and UC Server. It's important to note that you can use our user interface for managing users, or you can use Active Directory. We have an MMC plugin which reveals the exact same user interface that you see inside our own user interface, but it's inside Active Directory. So if you're used to using AD for user management, that's a great feature. The last step is the final system config. Final system configuration encompasses just the generic settings like setting the default administrator password, what country you're in, what your area code is, whether or not you want 10-digit dialing for your area, if you want to use a digit for accessing local or long-distance calls, whether or not you want to enable support for callers to transfer to an operator during voicemail. So I'm going to set that to be Bob's 201 extension. I'm also going to set Bob to be the default mailbox when we're unable to deliver a message to somebody in the event of a failure. And then which server we want to use for delivering email. In this case, the default is the Exchange server. So now system's configured. I'm going to go ahead and plug these phones in to the PoE ports on this switch, which provide them power. Now, because we've already gone through and we've associated the phones with users by way of the MAC address, when these phones boot up, they're going to be coming up completely configured automatically. The other deployment method, should you not want to do it in that order, is you could plug the phones in all at once before you run through the user's wizard. They will come up in the user interface, the phones will appear there, and then you can associate those phones with particular users or extensions, and then the phones will be programmed automatically. In this case, we did it in advance, so once they boot up, they'll get their configurations. So I'm just going to log into UC Client here as the administrator. And you'll notice that a lot of the configurations we've done are up here by default. So the users are all here, their identities are all configured, the users that we've associated with phones are here, which answering mode they're in, whether or not, what their message store is. In this case, we're using Active Directory, and it mentions what the message store is, as well as their authentication, so their Windows authentication. Here's the list of phones. Notice that the IP addresses are all filled in for the phones. This is because once they register with UC Server, we get their IP addresses and we associate those with the information that we had entered previously. Other information is the gateways that we set up, the ports. In this case, there's only one port because it's a SIP solution. What authentication? So these are all Windows users. There's the Windows authentications. When users start up their software, they get automatically authenticated because Windows has already authenticated them, so we use that same mechanism. The identities in the systems or extension, the data sources, so we install all sorts of different data sources as examples of how you can use our IBR system. Which servers, the Exchange server as well as the TFTP server that's used for configuration files for the SNOM and the GrandStream phones. And then the dial plan and total restrictions of all default values that are applied to 95% of the deployments. So at this point, phones are already configured, they should be up and running. Looks like that they're up and running. I'm going to take the SNOM phone and I'm going to call the Polycom phone at 202. Polycom phone rings, it says it's from Ed Jones. I pick it up and I start talking. So in a matter of 15 or 20 minutes, we've set up UC Server from the installation perspective, configuration, 3 phones configured, users configured, message stores configured, everything's done. Now, for adding new users, it's a simple matter of either running that server configuration wizard application again that we were just using, or going through the administration interface and following the same Windows new user wizard for creating users. And that's effectively the presentation. UC Server installed on Small Business Server 2008 in a very short amount of time. Very powerful, very easy to use. If you'd like more information, please go to our website, www.objectworld.com, or you can call us at 888-398-9698. Thanks for your time. See you later.